Welcome to Frequency. I'm Jenni Fields.
And I'm Gose. Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. To kick things off, Jenni, last week we mentioned that it was your birthday. And in fact, our episode came out on your birthday. Was that the highlight of your birthday, or was there something else from your week-long celebration that stood out to you?
I feel like this is a trick question today. So, of course, this coming out on my birthday was a highlight. I would say the other highlight was my barbecue that I had on Saturday with some friends and family, which was a day of absolute joy. Quite a lot of alcohol, I will say. But everybody was just saying how fun it was, and we just laughed all day. And that was a massive highlight for me.
Did you suffer from bun paralysis again?
Yes, because I couldn't choose my buns for my hot dogs and my burgers because there's so many buns in the supermarket. I got past it. I had too many hot dog buns, so they're in the freezer now for another event. But I went to a smaller supermarket. I just was like, I've got to make the decision. Done. Got brioche for the burgers. Lovely.
Solid choice.
Solid.
Brioche, pretzel. I think those are the top
Yeah.
ones. That feels very American of you to do a barbecue for your birthday in the summer.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe, but everybody here will be barbecuing in the summer. And my husband loves to barbecue. He's got two now. So any excuse to be on the grill. And you've got to enjoy the good weather when you have it over here because we don't have it for very long. So
Yeah.
if you've got a 2-week window, then we're going to be outside all the time.
So are we now officially past your birthday?
Yes.
Have the
Yes,
celebrations?
I had a
okay.
week-long celebration, which wrapped up with a picnic in a London park with my best friends Advita and Trudy, which was lovely. And that was the end. That was a week long. It's fine.
So we can officially say that my birthday is next.
We can now, yes. When's your
Okay,
birthday?
thank you. Yes, next in December, which will be really a 2 to 3 month long celebration because it will be my 50th. So
It's a big
there is
one.
a lot of planning going into that. But enough about birthdays, Jenni. Let's get into the stories you have picked for this week.
So I've got a real selection of articles this week, but nothing really about AI, which I feel is a first for us on this podcast. But I was quite determined to have a look at what was going on. And we've got some stuff around burnout and talking about some new buzzwords that are coming in there. We've got a bit of a topic around authenticity, which is a topic very close to my heart, but a question about whether or not you can be authentic in the world of corporate comms, internal comms. I saw a great post on LinkedIn that talked about the jobs market for internal communication professionals, which I want to share because I think it's worth exploring some of the data behind some of that doom and gloom that we often hear. And I also want to touch on trust and leadership for some recent insights that have come through from Gallup. So that's what's on the list. I'm going to kick us off with this burnout topic. So there was an article in the Economic Times which talks about quiet cracking. This is going to be one for the one for the teeth. And it's about this sneaky workplace burnout trend that is costing billions and breaking spirits. Now, quiet cracking is the latest workplace buzzword highlighting a dangerous trend where burnout that creeps in unnoticed. So as engagement is dipping globally and employee motivation is eroding, workers are finding themselves emotionally detached without really realizing it. And there's experts like Peter Juris, who's mentioned in the article, who talk about the need for early intervention, emphasizing the importance of management support and open communication to combat this silent productivity killer. Now, in a world that is constantly chasing productivity and purpose, this sort of silent workplace epidemic unfolding feels like some sort of unnecessary buzzword for me in this world of corporate buzzwords. We often see those dramatic resignations. We often see some of those other things. We've talked about quiet quitting, I think, in the past. We've had all sorts of things going on. So is this just another buzzword? But according to a recent report by Vice, this quiet cracking is something that's actually going to have quite an impact on the long-term success of an organization. Because what's happening is people are just slowly disconnecting until they don't realize it. And then they just kind of go, right, I'm done and I'm out. So the impact on organizations could be this really slow burn. And I think that's the risk to the productivity stuff. So is this just an issue around productivity? Is it another buzzword that we don't need? Is this just what happens when relationships break down? Like, what did you think when you saw the quiet cracking, in quotes, coming up on the list today?
So yeah, we had the quiet quitting, we had the quiet firing, now we have quiet cracking. And that's fine if we want to have some labels to it that get at the attention. I guess that's the highlight here, is that it's getting some attention. I don't think it's anything new. I think anybody that in this, we've spent a bit of time inside Ecology talking about burnout with Kelsey Buchholz, who's a member and an author on this topic, in addition to actually also doing a virtual event around burnout for communicators. So it's nothing new. And I think this is how burnout just is.
Mm,
Nobody burns out from in a day, in a week. And that's my caution around us, even how we use the term burnout, where someone be like, oh, do you want to have pizza tonight? And you're like, oh, I've had pizza 2 times this week. I'm so burned out on pizza. Like, we use that term when there actually is true mental and physical consequences to burnout. And it usually is this slow burn. And that's what I like the way about Kelsey talks about this, is she's got this chart that shows a match slowly burning
mm,
down. And it gets to the point where it starts to impact your mental health, your physical health, your relationship with others. And so I think if it takes a buzzword to draw some attention to it, that's fine. But I think this is just how burnout is. I think it is that slow, methodical beat down, cracks develop. I think your point of this is how relationships start to potentially dissolve, whether it's a professional relationship or a personal relationship.
mhm.
So it's nothing new, but I think anytime we can bring a healthy conversation around burnout and show to leaders, hey, this is what's happening inside the organization. I think the danger, though, is focusing on this as a productivity killer. I think if
Mhm.
you only care about burnout from productivity, you're really missing the conversation.
Mm. And I was just gonna come on to that productivity killer bit because I'm with you on the that's not kind of the point of this, because if you're just looking at that, like, and also define productivity in in an office environment, like, I still think we haven't fixed that. But you can't look at it from that perspective, because this is linked to engagement, it's linked to all the other things, that commitment, the loyalty, all that stuff that we're looking at, because you wouldn't know that it's having an impact on productivity, because people will carry on resentfully based on how they're describing this, and then suddenly go, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I'm not sure that the productivity is actually the symptom you would see. It's almost like I don't think you'd be aware of this until someone says, I don't want to do this anymore, which is why the recommendation of open communication to combat it, I think, is really important, to encourage that psychologically safe space and all of those things that we're looking for, where people can speak openly and freely about what's going on. But I do think it is another buzzword that we probably don't need. But to your point, it does start a conversation.
And I think it could be a big misstep too to think this is only about knowledge workers
Hmm.
or office staff or corporate staff or whatever, that this impacts everyone. And burnout isn't just a workplace problem. It is
Hmm.
an everywhere problem. So anybody who is trying to juggle work, but also you have demands at home, and maybe you've got young children at home, or you're taking care of an aging parent, or you've got both, or whatever it is, to think this is something that can just be fixed at work is also a bit of a misstep, along with thinking this is just for office staff. To think that
Mm.
your frontline employees aren't impacted by burnout would be a massive miss, in my opinion.
I'm going to move us on to the next article, because I think we're going to talk about this for a little while, which is from Sean Randall, who has the blog and I think kind of community about mixternal comms. And Sean has written an article about why authentic corporate communications is an impossible myth and what to do instead. And this was highlighted to us by an ecology member, Nicole Oseguera, which I think I've said correctly, who's tagged you and I in ecology in the app and said, you need to talk about this. So we had a read of it, and it talks about the fact that authenticity is pretty much impossible in the world of corporate comms. Now, I love this because I talk a lot about the fact that we don't want leaders to be authentic. We want them to be credible. And in this article by Sean, he talks about the fact that really it's always been a myth. So he refers back to some of the very early days of PR from Ivy Lee's 1904 PR firm talking about authenticity, and then looking at AI generated stuff now and how the goal of corporate comms hasn't ever really been about unfiltered truth. It's always been about shaping perceptions to serve business ends. And I think that's really important when we talk about authenticity, which I'm now putting in air quotes. He talks about the fact that the harder you try to look real, the more staged you become. So the scripted, unscripted moments, the iPhone style town halls, the feel good employee spotlights, they are all manufactured by the comms function. And he's sort of shining a light on the fact that employees aren't fooled by this. People know that this is all a bit manufactured. They see through that corporate speak. So calling things authentic actually makes them more suspicious because people know there is a playbook or there's a team behind every message. And there is a bit of an ethical piece in here. So he talks about the fact it's one thing to ghostwrite a CEO email, but it's another to pretend that ghostwriting isn't happening. So claiming sort of candor while selectively disclosing facts is what links to that erosion of trust and kind of edges us into manipulation. I think this is such an important topic for us, and I'm so grateful for Nicole for highlighting it to us because it's stayed in my mind since she shared it with us about a week or so ago around this whole authenticness for comms and how much it's just not true. So my question for you is, I love all of this, as I've said, but my question is really just what were your thoughts? Because I think there is a discussion around how we coach and advise leaders and allow them to change behavior rather than doing it for them. And I think we're still stuck in that in between bit where we're doing more of the doing and not enough of the coaching and advising. Is that having an impact on what I would call less credible leadership communication? I could talk about this for an entire episode, so I'm going to stop now.
Yeah, and thank you for setting the stage for that this could be a very lengthy conversation. Two quick thoughts before I get into my point of view here. One, thank you, Nicole, for sharing this. Not only as Nicole an ecology member, she's also a early listener of Frequency. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also really curious to wonder, like, what did PR look like in 1904? I'm sort of trying to envision what that would look like. But on this topic of authenticity, I think I think we've lost the meaning of it. And when I think of authenticity in PR, I just want my leaders to be authentic. And I'm like, what if they are? What
Mm-hmm.
if that
Mm-hmm.
person that you don't think they are, but what if that's really who they are? But you don't want to believe that's who they are. You still can't want authenticity. I think the role here with communicators, if we dump that word authenticity because it is so mangled and a bit obtuse around it, I think it's just honest. I think that's what people really want when they say authenticity is they want honesty. They want to know what they're reading is truthful. And you were talking about the employee stories that are out there that always sort of highlight. They're always positive. Typical internal communicators, they're not a news organization. If an employee has a major error and causes a company to lose thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, there's not an article in the newspaper, the company newspaper, about, oh my gosh, look at this horrible thing this employee did, and here's the investigations going on. No, there's always been a bit of spin to it. I know communicators do not like that. They don't like to think of that, always adding that positive light to it. I understand why we do it. I'm not saying it's bad that we do it, but let's be honest with
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing. And I think it comes back to that thing around honesty. Employees just want to know the truth. And that's why trust surveys and people don't believe what they're reading, because they don't probably think that it's honest or truthful.
Do you think there's something, and I've I've thought about this for a while in terms of the way communicators want leaders to communicate. And I'll give you an example. When I was head of internal comms for a UK part of a global business, we had a group team who were launching a new collaboration platform, much to my irritation in the UK, who had a lovely intranet that didn't need changing. But as they were wanting to roll this out, they came to me and said every member of the board in the UK has to blog on the new platform. And I remember saying, Bob won't blog. Because Bob was head of our retail division and he was out in the stores a lot of the time. Like, obviously, he was in leadership meetings, but he was on the ground with the team. Like, that's where he spent a lot of his time. He didn't want to blog because that wasn't who he was. And I was quite protective of my board in terms of I'm not going to make them do something that isn't real to them because nobody's going to believe them. And so Bob never blogged because we managed to protect that. But that's that need for there's got to be a video, there's got to be this, but that's not how you want to communicate. That's not your natural style. You're not comfortable. How do we get around that in a world that is so digital now? I mean, this was a while ago for me, but how do we navigate that as communicators? Because I think that's part of the challenge is the tools and the things we've got in our toolkit to communicate require people to do things that don't feel comfortable and like them.
I I think it's misaligned expectations on it. If that's what employees want from their leaders and leaders aren't equipped to do that, then there's a misalignment there. No different than there's probably some things that leaders do that employees don't want. That's also a misalignment.
But you've used the word equipped there. So where I was saying like Bob won't block because Bob would be more, I mean, I'm just using Bob as an example, but he'd be more likely to do like a video update or an audio update than
Yeah.
write something. And that was my point. So when you're saying like leaders are not equipped, do you mean that, let's take that example of Bob, that Bob should have been trained and taught how to write the blog or something different?
I think what I mean is that's just not the way, that's not how they communicate. That's not their style. If Bob likes doing videos and that's where he is at his best, then do videos. And the employees that like to watch videos will watch Bob do videos. Not everyone's going to read a blog
Yeah.
out there. And you could have every single leader do a blog post every day about what they're going to, and everybody's going to read it. So I think it's, again, it's that if they're being, so your Bob is my Steve.
Okay.
Okay. So I worked with a COO named Steve. Steve was convinced that employees wanted to hear about the golf courses that he golfed at every weekend.
Oh,
That was
Steve.
Steve's authentic self.
Uh-huh.
That's not what employees want from their leaders. That's not the authenticity they want. However, would it be important for them to know that that's actually who Steve is?
Yes.
Steve wants you to know about the fancy golf courses that he golfed at because that was a disconnect for him. He did not recognize that employees could not afford to pay $300, $500 a round, but that was his life. So there was a massive disconnect there. Where I stepped in as the communicator was to say, like, Steve, no, there's a big gap there that what you think is going to happen is not what's going to happen. What would be better for you to talk about is how many bunkers you hit or your scores or how many clubs you threw that day. Like, that's the connection you're looking to build,
Yeah.
not bragging about your golf courses. So I think it's that connection. And
Yeah.
if that's then the authentic self, because again, I think that there's this element where employees might want their CEO to be authentic. Oh, CEO, we want to be authentic. Well, what if she is?
Yeah.
And that authentic self is not who you want from them.
Yeah.
So I just always go back to honesty. If your comms and what you're sharing is honest, now, one of my favorite sayings, which I've stolen from a Fast Company owner from years ago, honesty without compassion is cruelty. So yes, be honest, but there's a compassionate element that leaders need to share there. Understanding by sharing certain numbers, by sharing certain results, like that's going to create some discomfort or uncomfortable things for people. But if you're honest, then I think you can feel good about yourself. But I think authenticity is this very dangerous thing to go after because
Mm.
it's faulty.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've written a whole book on the fact it's not what we want people,
Well,
leaders to
we
go
didn't bring in
after.
the other one, which is transparency.
Yeah, yeah. And
They can't. So I've
yeah,
always like, can you be translucent? Which is like, this is like looking through wax paper. Like you can kind of see some things, but not everything through it. Like they're never going to be able to be.
yeah.
They're just, they're just not.
Yeah, and I think as communicators, I think kind of the point of the article from Sean is definitely around letting go of this. We need to have more authentic communications in
Hmm.
our organization. And for me, the answer is take that off the table and focus on we need to have more credible leaders, which includes all the things you've talked about, compassion, honesty, does include transparency. But there's, the bigger themes within there are vulnerability, trustworthiness, having integrity, like that. That's what the focus is, because if you can do that as a communicator, and I do think there is this, if you're advising and coaching leaders, then the communications will become more credible and more believable, essentially, which is what we want, because it's more genuine rather than authentic, and they are different. But I think our focus on trying to make it authentic and the manufactured nature of how we do stuff just doesn't allow for that unless you're coaching and advising in the way we were doing
Hmm.
with like Bob and Steve. Then I think you can kind of get there. But I think we've just got to take the authentic comms off the table as a phrase and put it
And I
to
think
bed.
with, even with transparency, I think that's where leaders need to understand. And there's lots of better ways to say this than how I'm going to say it, is to say like, I actually can't tell you
Yeah.
information about that. Or it's actually none of your business what you're asking or what you want
Yeah. Don't say
from me.
that.
Like, no, no, no. I'm right. I'm saying don't say that. But there's an element of them also saying like, yeah, that's my job to do. That's not your job
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
So the transparency in it, again, that's being honest
Yeah.
about things
'Cause
versus
it
saying like,
is.
oh no,
It's,
we'll
yeah.
we'll get back to you later. Or, oh, that's a great question. Well, no, say like, actually, I can't answer that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's reasons why. I can't answer it because it's commercially sensitive. I can't answer
Oh
it
yeah.
because we haven't finalized the details. I can't answer it because it's not appropriate. Like there's loads of different ways of being able to articulate that in your own language and words that allow you to be someone that people will connect with and the outcomes and all of that stuff. So I think it's just a great article, and we'll put, as we always do, links in the show notes. But I think it's something that every communicator should read to
Hmm.
just reflect on how manufactured their communication is, certainly with their leadership team. I'm going to move us on to a post by Kevin Blasco, who has done a post about the internal comms job market in 2025. It's a post on LinkedIn. So again, we'll pop a link to that. But I wanted to share the data in it because there's often a theme in our industry that everything's very negative and it's really depressing how things are going. And actually, I think when you look at the data, it's not looking quite so bad. So Kevin has analyzed the data for the first half of the year, and he has found some encouraging trends. So there were 1,725 IC jobs posted in the first half of this year, which is a 32% increase over the second half of 2024. And this happened while job postings declined 5.1% market wide in May alone. So that is a very positive number, showing a good trend. Vice president positions doubled from 20 to 40 openings, while entry level coordinator roles grew 47%. Manager roles are still dominating at 51% of all postings. That's interesting. Minneapolis St. Paul broke into the top 10 job markets with internal comms opportunities featuring in 419 unique locations outside the major metros, and remote IC roles held steady at about 12 to 13% of postings, but that's nearly double the 7 to 8% market wide average. So he says the bottom line is internal communications shows remarkable resilience in a challenging job market. This for me paints a picture of growth. It paints a picture of movement in the market and positivity. I find it interesting that the manager layer is dominating, and I think that reflects what I see in the market in the UK as well. But I just wanted to get your take on this. You've got a great community of members in Ecology, and I think you have got a better sense of that reality in this market, certainly in the US. So does this reflect what you hear from your members? or does it feel like it's a million miles away?
Yeah. First off, shout out to Kevin for this. He does a lot of really great work with sharing openings across the communications world in a
Mhm.
newsletter. So in addition to this post, we should also add a link to his newsletter for people to sign up
Mhm.
for. It is, as someone who's invested a lot of their career in internal comms, it is really great to see what looks to be a pretty healthy job market out there. I think what's interesting to me is, of those 1725, I'm looking at the notes here, that 40 of those were VP levels.
Mhm.
So that's still not a lot of growth opportunity, I think, for a lot of people who might feel like they're stuck in manager or director roles. And sometimes those titles can be a little
Mhm.
misgiving, that a director at one company is a manager at another company, and all of that. But the key is that there's still a lot of jobs out there. The remote aspect is the part that I think is interesting, and that's the change that I've seen in the last couple of years. Is it, even though 12 to 13% of the postings are remote and it's double the market wide average, that has to be a reduction in the past. The jobs that I'm seeing that I'm then posting inside Ecology, very few are remote. I actually think it's lower than a 12 to 13%. I'm not disputing Kevin's data. Just the jobs that I'm seeing and that I'm posting inside Ecology, it's less than 1 in 10, I would say, are fully remote. Mostly
Mm,
hybrid, a lot in office, or you need to be in one of these 2 or 3 markets, which is fine. That's sort of going back to the way it was
mm,
before. I think this should be encouraging to people who are out there job hunting and looking for the next opportunity, but it doesn't change how frustrated I think people are. I think if some, I know of people who've been on the job hunt for 12 months, 18 months out there, and I don't know that this data helps them, because they've been in it for so long, and
mhm,
they've been rejected, and like I'm seeing now, there's this class action lawsuit being launched against Workday because of their platform that apparently companies use, where people are applying for a role and then immediately getting rejection notices, meaning that no one's even looking at the the applications. No one's even looking at this stuff. So the question is, what is this algorithm that's being done? So it's great that all these openings are out there, but what is the hiring process? What does that look like for candidates who are going through this? From that, it still sounds like it's a really awful
mm.
situation for not just communicators, for a lot of different roles out there, but specifically with this article, it doesn't sound like it's a really great experience for people going through the interview process.
Mm, and that I would say that echoes what I've heard in the UK as well. I think the 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 process is a bit broken, and I think that doing the kind of quick apply on LinkedIn, certainly recruiters who I saw on a panel at the end of last year were saying, like, don't do that. Like, don't do the quick apply, because it's not enough to break through the volume that's going to be there. Like, you've got to really put the effort in. And I was chatting to someone last week who's been looking for a role for a while, and they were kind of chatting to me and saying, like, what would your advice be? And they've got through to interview. But I think this industry piece, I think you sort of called it the market side, people are focused in on people that have got market or industry experience. And I think that went away for such a long time, but now seems to be such a massive thing that if you don't have market or industry experience, people are going to kind of discount you
Hmm.
from the pile because there's hundreds coming through. So that criteria is always going to be tighter. And I think focusing in on that is going to be helpful. I also think your point about the fact that a VP versus a manager, like, job titles can be so different in so many different places. And what does it really mean? And I think that is hard to know really what's going on. And it just seems to take so long. I spoke to someone the other day who's not in comms, they're in events, and they've been going through an interview process for, I think, 2 months, I would say. Like, they're on, like, the 4th round of something, and I was like,
Right.
"My." I mean, I'm exhausted and I'm not doing it, but I just
Right.
like, there's something that's it's almost like the change in the world of jobs and that market and that process, no one's evolved the process to reflect the current state of the job market, and it needs to be changed in order to reflect the volume and all of that stuff. Because it's not a good experience. I don't think I've spoken to anyone that's had a good experience in the last 6 months.
I'm wondering a couple things you said there. I wonder if that relying on industry experience or, experience in a certain sector or market is a way to just automatically down select, immediate
Yeah.
automatic way to limit the people. Even if you're not getting the right candidates, it's a way to kind of silence the noise a little
Hmm.
bit. And then I also wonder too, is it the length of the process also another way for people who aren't really bought
Mm.
in to just sort of eliminate themselves because they're exhausted by it, which I don't think either of those things actually helps the hiring process. Is it if you're a manufacturer and you are hiring for, let's say, an internal comms director and you want someone with frontline comms experience, you should also be looking at hospitality. You should also be looking at
Yeah.
healthcare. You should because it's you're bringing in a more well-rounded experience where it becomes a bit of an echo chamber if it's always just the same
Yeah.
industry. But I wonder if they're doing that to sort of automatically disqualify a big population
Mm.
because of the way people now apply for jobs is so easy. And even if you're not qualified, you can still apply for a job. It's like both systems are sort of making it worse
Yeah.
for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there is also the challenge of salary expectations and what people are expecting to get from roles and what the reality is of what those salaries are of the roles. And in the UK, there was a great report last year from a recruitment consultancy called VMA Group, and
Hmm.
they do have pockets in other parts of the world, but they did a really great report called Inside Insight, which I wrote about in terms of the key trends from that, which I'll put a link in the show notes to it. But there's a really good part of that report, which is the salary expectations based on sector. And it's something I use all the time with clients for us to look at, is this person operating at that right level? And, just trying to get a bit of a sense of that. And I think that's really important because I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think both sides aren't coming at this from the right way. And therefore there's just a whole load of chaos in the middle, and the only people that suffer from that really are the people that are trying to find their next job,
Hmm.
really.
Because I'm really good at solving problems that are none of my business,
Yeah. Do go on.
this is what I would do.
Okay.
I would like have people like, here's our job. Answer these questions. Like, they're not personal questions. Like, how many years of experience do you have? How many of this do you have? Let's say you're looking for someone with frontline. Do you have this? And if you answer yes to everything, okay, now here's how you apply.
Yeah.
That there might be some way for people to filter out, or you to filter out before, because right now the only way to do it is just apply.
Yeah.
There's no criteria to apply. And I think even that might even help recruiters. It might help people in the process of just having some criteria that
Yeah.
not allow people to apply until they fit a certain mold. That might eliminate some frustration of people who, I don't blame people. If you've been unemployed for 12 to 18 months and you need a paycheck, you're going to apply for a lot of things that
Yeah.
you might in your mind qualify for, that company isn't looking for, but you get frustrated because it's another application. What if the system was more built around, you have to qualify before you
Yeah.
apply? I'm not saying that's the solution, but it's got to make it a little bit better than what it
Yeah.
is now.
And I think just the days of being able to find a job, apply, sending your CV, I just think it just hasn't moved enough with the
Hmm.
technology, to your point, and the opportunities that technology gives us in terms of being able to make that process better. Right. Our final article today is about employee trust in leadership. So this was something I saw on Instagram and then went off and found an article, which I found in entrepreneur.com. And it says that only 20% of people trust leadership in the organization. So 20% of employees trust the leadership of their organization. And this for me was quite a staggering number, because I can't quite understand why it's still so low, but I'll we're definitely going to talk about that. So this is some recent research from Gallup. It says that only 20% of US employees strongly agree that they trust their organization's leadership. Obviously, that has an impact on morale and decision making and innovation. The article also talks about the fact that about 70% of the variance in team engagement comes back to the manager. So it's not just the senior leaders, which I think we always think about when we talk about leadership, but there's a manager element to this as well. Now, when I was looking at this article, they referred to a book that Gallup have produced. called Culture Shock, which I've started listening to. It's only a couple of hours long. It came out in 2023, which I had to check because as I'm listening to the audiobook, they're having the debate about the return to office and hybrid, which I love, as listeners will know. And it feels out of date already. And that was published in 2023. So I'm bookmarking it as I'm listening to it. And I think I'll bring it back to a future episode because there's some conversation and insights in there that I just think are helpful for us to consider about this. But coming back to this 20% of US employees strongly agree that they trust their organization's leadership, I struggle with the fact it's still so bad. I just feel like I don't know why we're not getting this right. I don't know why engagement is at like a significant, not something 9-year low or something. I feel like I don't know why we're not getting better at this. It leaves me somewhat speechless as as you're gathering, because Chuck.
Can I ask a follow-up question to you
Yeah,
on this?
yeah.
Who's the we? When you say we are not getting better at this, who's the we?
Leaders.
Okay.
So I think there is and I suppose I mean kind of leadership, and not just leaders. I'm putting kind of organizations as a whole in that bucket, but I'm looking at HR, comms, leadership, because I think there is a lack of leadership development in organizations and management development that has been lacking for a really long time. And maybe it's because we just eat and drink this all the time that we've been seeing it for 20 years and we're going, why is this not getting any better? But those same people must be seeing it as well. And yet no one seems to be doing anything. And why not?
As you
That's where I'm
slap
at.
your hip, as
I
I
did
heard you.
slap my hip. Yeah. And why not?
I'm not surprised by this number. I'm just not, because I think leaders drastically discount the role that trust plays. And here's, I think they come into organizations, whether they've been there a while or they moved to new teams or they're outside hire, inside hire, whatever, because they're in this leadership position, they assume trust. I don't think they are doing anything to build trust. And there are all kinds of things. We can have conversations around this for, there's this calculus and around, there are some things you just have to trust. You have to trust that, like, when you do certain things, you can't be like, well, I don't know if this is going to work, so I'm not going to, you just have to trust some processes that are out there.
Yeah.
But people you don't. And I don't think leaders, manager level above, do enough to actually build trust, because that's often a one-to-one or one-to-team approach, because it's very easy, takes one thing to break trust.
Mhm.
And then they may never trust you again. So I don't think they do enough to actually work to build trust in organizations. One of my biggest, I was going to say character flaw, but that's not right. That's not the right word. I would say maybe my kryptonite. I'll bring this to superhero world.
Okay.
One of my biggest kryptonite is I look up to leaders for inspiration, recognition, all of those things. And I do that to a fault. And I'm routinely disappointed by that, yet I keep doing it over and over and over again. But because of that disappointment, that's why I'm not surprised by this 20% figure. I wish I was in that 20% of people who feel like they strongly trust. I'm jealous of those people who work in organizations where they have that strongly agree that they trust their leaders. Those have got to be the companies that are successful. And the ones that
Mm,
aren't have
mm.
these leaders who, whether it's by ignorance or omission or whatever, just aren't taking the time to build trust with their teams, largely because they assume, well, you have to trust us. We're the ones in charge. And employees are saying, no, we don't.
I think you're right. It is that I've come in with the fact that I just expect you to trust me because I'm in charge or I'm in a management position. And again, it's why I wrote the book, because it is such a responsibility to be a leader. You want people to follow you, but you have to do the work. And I think we have this belief that if I'm capable, which is one of the 8 practices of being credible, then people will just believe me and follow me. But you can't just be capable. That doesn't work. Like, you've got to be trustworthy. You've got to have integrity. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be able to have a vision. Like, there's so many other things to it. And I just feel that there is such a duty to get that right. And I'm really interested in why it's not happening. And maybe it's because actually there are loads of people teams and HR teams and comms teams really fighting this. And every time they're going to get budget, it's just being told, no, we don't need it because we're great. And maybe that outcome and impact on the bottom line linked to that path that is, employee engagement, customer engagement, and then, profit and turnover and all those things, like how that link isn't being articulated enough for people to really understand it. I'm not going to slap my thigh again because it hurts, but I think there is a big question for me about what is it going to take to move this in the right direction? Because if a global pandemic hasn't done that, what do we need to do to get the what needs to happen? Open
Mhm.
question to anybody listening. Let us know on LinkedIn.
Yeah, trust is just so fragile.
Yeah,
It's so fragile, and I don't think that leaders, managers, leadership, whatever word you use, take care of it in
yeah.
that sense. They think it's just there all the time, and it's just
Mhm.
not, and it's
Yeah,
so fragile.
yeah. And it's not just one. I mean, I know you said it sort of takes one thing to break trust. It does, but it can also be just chipped away at slowly without you
Agreed.
realizing it. So you've got to be so aware of your behaviors and what you're doing and how you're communicating, because it could be one big thing, but you could be doing stuff every day that is just chipping away at that trust. And I think
Mhm.
unless you're willing to have a conversation with someone, either someone in your team or someone external as a coach or whatever it might be, to say, look, this is what's going on in my team and I don't know what I'm doing, but this is what's happening. Okay, well, then let's have a look at that and see what's going on. Because if those things are happening, then you have a role to play in that. So,
Maybe
yeah,
that's the real quiet cracking. Maybe that's the cracks that are quietly forming
yeah,
in the trust that is happening across organizations, that it's not the one big thing. It's let's say you've got a manager and every week they cancel your one-on-one. You might still trust them, but those actions
oh,
start to it just starts
yeah,
to make you hedge a bit the next time something happens. And so maybe
yeah,
those cracks that are forming, they are not doing enough to take care of the trust that they're hopefully wanting to form
yeah,
with
yeah,
employees. And maybe they don't. I would love to know, do leaders care?
yeah.
Do leaders care that only 20% of your people trust you? I don't know the answer to that, but I would love to know.
Yeah, we've got a lot more questions on this, I think. And I will finish the book. Like I said, it's only a couple of hours, so I want to finish it off because there's some really good stats and correlations in there. So I'll do some little notes and stuff and we'll share that as well. So that wraps up our articles today. Done a little fist wrap up there. What are you freaking out about this week?
So Jenny, I love many things in this world. We don't need to list all of them.
I mean,
One
I'm
of the
interested in
things
what they are, but
one of
go
the
on.
things that I think surprises people that I really love in this world is hypocrisy. I love seeing hypocrisy at play, and I'm going to call out one today, which is what I'm freaking out about. We see communicators all the time talk about, oh, we see when AI is written and is it an M dash or not dash and blah, 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 and AI shouldn't be writing your content, all these things. But apparently, we have zero issues with using AI to create really awful images and really awful infographics out there. And I'm going to flip hats and say, if I was a designer out there, I would be roasting communicators out there sharing these horribly designed infographics. And you can tell that they're designed by AI. No different than people saying you can see when content is written by AI. I can spot this 1,000 miles away when it's out there. So I would love designers to just start having at it with communicators out there. They're showing these horribly designed infographics. You see even the fonts around it and the images are cartoonish. And I'm like, go get them. Like
Great.
if we're gonna criticize AI written content, we can't be held like we've got to be able to handle that criticism of us. Because why are we doing that? Because we don't have those design skills. No different
Mhm.
than maybe other people don't have the writing skills. So we can't criticize one without accepting criticism from the other, which is that hypocrisy that I love so much.
Okay. I need to see some of these AI generated.
I'll start sharing them with you.
I'm here for it. I'm here for
They
it.
are beautiful in their ugliness.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So my freak out this week is pavlova, which I wrote about in my email to my community this week, because for my birthday, my mum made her pavlova. And it's like a signature dish in our family. Both my mum and my dad make it. And we're always having a discussion about what's pavlova and what's meringue. So for the benefit of people here, a pavlova has a marshmallow layer, which makes it different from meringue. So if you're ever in a restaurant and they say there's a pavlova, which this is my dad's pet hate, then you have to make sure it's got the marshmallow, otherwise it's a meringue. And as I said in my email, if you would like the recipe for how to make the pavlova like my mum and dad, just let me know and I'll send it to you, because I feel like everybody should know the joy of the magical marshmallow layer of a pavlova. And
So I got your
what's
newsletter.
on my mind this week.
I got your newsletter and read it this week. And also thank you for providing the clarification of the phrase, was it fobbed off?
Yeah, if you've been fobbed
Yeah.
off with a meringue.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that translation for those of us that did not know what that meant.
That's fine. I like to make sure that I'm aware that some things I think everybody knows what they mean. As you educate me so much on this show when I talk about downing tools or being poorly or whatever it is, and you're like, what are you talking about? I don't think I've yet to say to you, what are you talking about? So I've clearly got more of those weird
challenge
words than you.
accepted.
Okay.
Challenge accepted.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. All the articles and other things we've mentioned that inspired this conversation are in the show notes. And don't forget to rate and review after you've listened. Subscribe so that you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone that you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can find us on YouTube as well. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show, and we'll be back next week with more news, insights, and opinions about everything comms and leadership in workplaces today. Keep tuning in and turning up.